Into the wild I'll go, and into the wild I am. It's been a while, freedom child, since I left my roots back home. Into the wild I'll go, and into the wild I am. It's been a while, freedom child, since I left my roots back home.
Welcome to the Free Birth Society podcast. This is a radical space for women who are ready to celebrate their autonomous choices in birth, motherhood, and beyond. Together, we'll learn about wild birth through personal narrative, we'll explore the politics of birth, and we'll analyze everything that relates to our lives as women from a feminist perspective. Here's your host, Emily Saldea.
It's been a while, freedom child, since I left my roots back home.
Imagine a world where girls are properly initiated into their first bleed, where mothers and daughters talk freely and openly about their bodies, and where women care for themselves and each other outside the lens of medical pathology. We can have this world, but we can't do it without you. Kristen Hauser and Nancy Lucina are bringing the first ever Blood Mysteries School to Free Birth Society this winter, a 4-month journey alchemizing the sacred and the science of the power of the womb. You will learn how to properly initiate and reinitiate women and girls through powerful rites of passage, support the women in your community through cycle issues, womb pain, and hormonal imbalances, and take a deep dive into the spiritual and energetic components of our blood mysteries. If you are a birth keeper, an energy healer, a postpartum worker, an herbalist, this school is for you. And if you're a woman wanting to dive deep into your own healing for you and your lineage, this school is for you. If you are ready to be a part of the generation of women healing the hormonal chaos and womb trauma that runs rampant in our female bodies, head over to bloodmysterieschool.com and enroll today. We begin February 2nd. Today I'm talking with licensed midwife turned radical birth keeper, Kemi BirthJoy Johnson. After 2 traumatic hospital births of her own and nearly 4 decades of pursuing medical midwifery, Kemi was faced with the harsh realities of the medical system over and over again, and decided to remove herself from it for her sake and the sake of the women that she served. In this episode, we talk about the modern-day witch hunt of traditional midwives by the medical industry, what it looks like to serve women in integrity, and how women like Kemi are reclaiming the word midwife all over the world.
All right, welcome.
It's so good to be here, Emily. Try not to over smile, but I just love your fire. I love it. I love your fire. I've loved it, and so I'm always telling people who have the slightest idea about what maternity services is actually about. And so what you need to start doing first before you're pregnant is just, you need to add yourself to Free Birth Society, and you need to see all the twin pregnancies and the breech babies falling out of women. You need to see that because it's a reset. It's a reset, a very necessary one. Thank you for doing what you do.
Thank you for
you probably saved lives. You probably saved lives. You've at least saved sanity, marriages, perineums. You know, I'm thinking you've saved lives
for sure.
Yeah.
That should be my new tagline.
I tell you, if you're very, very good, if you're very, very good, I'll get you a T-shirt that says it.
Oh my
If
God.
you're very good.
That's funny. Okay, so I heard a little bird told me that you were once an accountant. Tell me
Oh, yeah.
your story.
No, accountant. So head towards accountancy was my reflex. It was my safety mechanism, because I'd had a dreamy kind of weird woo-woo dream when I was 15 that I needed to be a midwife. I didn't know what it was, so I heard. No, I didn't. So I heard my mum was still mute about her birth, so you can imagine how harmed my mother was. She still couldn't talk about it. So we didn't know. I didn't know what a midwife was or anything. And then so I went and looked it up. I was on quite a good trajectory at that time. My parents had worked bloody hard and supported me, and I'd got a scholarship for a private school, and so I was having an amazing education, and was one of two black girls in the whole school. Yeah, in London, there's about 1,000 girls in this school. It's a girls' school, and there's just two black girls. So my parents had worked very hard to give me this education. My dad had a view on me being a doctor, so I looked up what a midwife was, and then I said, "Oh, Dad, huge gear shift. I'm going to be a midwife instead." He said, "Oh, no, you're going to be a doctor. You're going to be an obstetrician." So I said, "Oh, no, it's definitely not going to be that. So I'm going to be a midwife." So we had a big falling out over it, and I dug my heels in. I know, because he was my first love, so his voice carried a lot of weight, right? So I said, okay, I won't do what my dad doesn't want me to do, but I'm certainly not going to be an obstetrician because I know what they're about. I'm gonna be an accountant. So that's so I did, because you can't. I took midwifery very seriously. I take childbirth very seriously, and knew how enormous it was. So we're in that situation. I decided instead to be an accountant because at that time I couldn't keep a plant alive, and I wasn't certain that I was really going to be a very safe pair of hands at childbirth. So I went into accountancy instead. Really loved it, and but the calling kept coming. So yeah, I go to college and I start my training with the ACCA, which is a financial accounting higher education. So I'm doing all of that, and I'm running a small team, and it's all going very, very well. I have my babies. Absolute systemically racist fiasco.
What happened?
And but we're alive. And at that time, I kind of knew something wasn't quite right. So for the second pregnancy, I still wasn't quite with it, and I took my laboring body without my husband that time, my ex-husband, because he assisted them to sabotage my health and that of my son. I was 24.
Okay.
I was a very fit, healthy 39-week 24-year-old, newly married, with a little basketball bump at the front, growing beautifully baby. And I literally skipped into my 39-week appointment, and they went, "Ooh, your blood pressure's raised. I think you need to have an induction."
Yeah.
And I didn't ask a single question. I didn't say how does it work? What do I do? Whatever. I thought they'd give me a pill and I'd sneeze and catch a baby.
Wow.
That's what I thought. Yeah.
What
And I know, imagine that. Someone with a calling as a midwife is that naive. And I went.
But also, why would you know any different?
But this is why I would like if I would call them colleagues, but I'm no longer a midwife, which you'll hear about later on. So um, I just very upset that people with so much power would not be more transparent, or would not give the information rather than have it having to be hauled out of you. Because what I've noticed, you kind of haul this information out of them and they just give you inaccurate information. Now, when I say they, I'm just talking about the majority. There's going to be people that say, "Oh, not all midwives." "Oh, Kemi, how could you say that?" There are going to be the gems. There are the gems within the system, but they're just the minority. It's clear. It's clear that they're the minority.
And it's almost irrelevant because they still not only work for the system and participate in enabling said system, but as the consumer / mother, we don't know who the gems are.
We don't know
because
the
everyone
gems.
acts like they're the fucking unicorns, and then you
That's
go in and you get abused. So
and you really find out that they're not. Yeah, I know. That's why I use the term wolves in sheep's clothing a lot. It's all very offensive to some people, but
okay, everything I do is offensive to someone.
Oh, all right.
You're welcome here. It is
So,
wolves in sheep's clothing, absolutely.
so and that's, to me, that's worse. I'd rather you were just straight up, look, I'm a midwife. Look, I'm my agenda is about my employer. It's not
I
about
hate
you.
women.
Just say it. Just wear a t-shirt, and then I know where I stand when I come in with my big belly, can't see my feet.
Right. I agree. I've said that a lot, on the show and behind closed doors, that in many ways, I think that the lying midwife is more hurtful than the creepy OB, because you expect woman to woman care and love, support, the betrayal that's wrapped up.
That's the word. And that's the word I hadn't used until about a year ago, when I realized, oh, that's actually what we're doing.
Yes.
Because at least your guard's up when you go to an obstetrician, if you know anything about the birth world, which I didn't at 24 and 26. At least at 26, I had the sense to know, okay, so you think you're going back to a safe place, but at least don't let them touch you. And so they couldn't touch me. And then in the end, I gave birth to my second son with my back pressed against the door to keep out the midwife, because she'd left the room for a minute. Yeah, yeah. They're not happy births. They're not the ones that I facilitate, or the ones, when I say facilitate, I'm Michelle O'Dont's right. We just got to not mess it up. So the births that I'm present at, that I don't fuck up, they,
That's your business card. Not fucking up.
I might put it on my business card. That's literally all I have to do. It's just don't fuck it up.
I know. It's not that hard, by the way.
It's really not that hard.
I had a student recently ask me, how do I not fuck up births? Like, how do I not do what everyone does? And I was like, it's not hard.
It's really not hard. Just sit there and shut up. That's what my daughter-in-law told me to do. They put the telephone in the bed and said, but you're not allowed to speak. It's like, fine, yeah. And her birth went really well, okay? She just wanted to know that her mother-in-law was nearby, sweet. But that's all it takes. And this is what I love about your movement, because it's a big fuck you to the whole of the somebody called it, beautiful Yolanda, did she call it the industrial obstetric complex the other day? I think so. Industrialized. It is, because women are just so are juicily powerful, and when left alone do spectacular things. So if they do invite us to be present, because we seem to hold that feeling of safety for them, the best we can do to honor them is do nothing, be quiet, be in the corner of the room, be out of the room. We just need to give them what they want, but no more than that.
And I do find that the more I've attended births as the authentic midwife, the more I've learned how to trust myself, and the more I've learned actually how to trust birth, which is such a overused, like, exploited term. But for me to actually learn the terrain of undisturbed primal wild birth, I've actually found, in some ways, now that I trust myself, I can do more, and I can say more, and I can touch more, and I can take more initiative. But Yolanda talks about this concept of being responsible to, not for the woman, being responsible to her. And because a lot of women, when they come to me wanting to attend births outside the system, they have this idea that they're not supposed to exist in the room. And it's like, you know what, until you figure out how to be, maybe you should just play it that way.
That's right.
Because if you think you're a doula that needs to do rebozos every 5 seconds, get over yourself, sit in the corner. But once you go through the initiations to actually show up in the room,
Yeah,
That's when
yeah,
it gets really fun, because you can trust
yeah,
yourself to speak and touch and move and shift the energy in that
yes,
kind of shamanic way when it's needed, and
yes.
not ever when it's not needed. And there's no way to rush
No,
learning that. That takes messing up so much.
my God.
I know.
Oh my God, it's
So
so
many.
painful. when, when like I was on the register, and a reasonably experienced midwife when I cast my mind back to two major cups, major. Um, and so that's why I had to just put my head in my hands, because it's so right. And I think we need that humility to do that walk. But that's another reason why I say a lot about, I think originally birth keeping was always about apprenticeship,
Mhm.
and you could kind of learn with somebody who's very, very, very experienced, so that at least you're with somebody who can save your fuck ups. So, for the sake of the woman, yeah, not for our sake, we just have to have the pain, but for the woman and the baby's sake. So I'm really big on this idea of apprenticeship. I'm really big, but not apprenticeship for midwifery, because I think midwifery has been is it's been messed up. I can't even call it that anymore. I
Right.
call myself a birth keeper, and I'm really happy with that term, and it sits well with me. So I think we need to be apprenticing each other with that, so that if we do mess up, the woman and the baby don't have to suffer our mess ups. That there'll be somebody there to rescue the situation. If you get what I mean.
Of course, yeah.
Uh,
And
Um,
in spite of, or what's the right word, in lieu of having that, right?
yeah,
Because most women in my field,
yeah,
they want an apprenticeship so badly, but it
yeah,
doesn't exist because
yeah,
it's only medical midwives, and who wants to
yeah.
do that? So we have to become
I love you.
the, oh, been there, done that. I mean, I did a medical midwifery apprenticeship. It was
All right.
awful. Um, I did it for years. Yeah. Anyway,
Yeah, yeah,
but we have to become the mentors that the
yeah,
next generation of birth keepers
yeah,
can apprentice with,
yeah.
and
That's
that's,
right.
it's kind of the awkward piece of, we have this online midwifery school, which is kind of an
Yeah,
oxymoron in some
yeah,
respects. We're not bringing women to birth, which obviously everyone's aware of that, but we've got to start somewhere. We
yeah.
have to just get out there and start doing it,
I
because
agree.
we are going to mentor women eventually. I mean,
Mm,
I bring women to births, but I'm just one person,
yeah,
we have
yeah.
to
I
become it.
agree.
Yeah, it's kind
Yeah,
of an awkward time in the revolution.
it is an awkward time, but I still feel that we're on time, because the attention of the birthing population does seem to be more on birth keepers,
Yes.
giving birth outside of the system than it ever was before. And this I always call it a situation with a virus, is it's one of the silver linings, I think. Being able to see the subterfuge in that world is enabling people to see that actually it's the whole of medicine. It's not just that.
It is,
So
I would say it's fairly, I feel embarrassed that it had to get this bad for
yeah.
humanity to even try on. Like, how bad did we have to have our babies treated in the system?
Woo,
How
okay.
bad,
Okay.
it's so
Okay.
painful. And I'm not saying that judgmentally to women at
No,
all.
no, I did it. I I did it. I did it to
Everyone does.
right. So,
But
my
I guess,
children came to
it,
unnecessary harm
right.
because of my choices. So there you go,
But I guess if it really does just come down to, well, if you don't know your options, you don't have any.
That's
And
right.
if you traumatize a woman and then put her into survival mode alone with a
Yeah,
newborn,
yeah,
what is she going to do?
yeah, that's
And then
right.
she's knocked up 2 years later. What is she going to fucking
Yeah,
do? She's not
that's
resourced
right.
enough to like
That's
break
right.
that chain. I mean,
That's right.
in some respects, she could be resourced enough because women are breaking the chain, but it's complicated.
It is complicated. The solution's very simple.
Right. it's also not complicated.
Exactly. No, but it's a complicated situation we're in because we have been groomed to have our power outside of ourselves,
Exactly.
and
From birth.
and my daughter-in-law's one of her favorite terms that she just coins it beautifully, outsourcing.
Mm-hmm.
She says, we've been groomed to outsource our health, our love lives,
Yeah.
our fertility, our so she has taken her power back fully, and she started that process before she became pregnant. Like it was like, okay, I know what I'm doing, and then when she became pregnant, it was like a huge, oh, I get it. And her mothering, you just go, oh yeah, I get it. Like she's the epitome of somebody who takes responsibility.
Mm.
And I think I am now there, but she's done it in half the time. I think
But we hope, right? For
we
the
are evolving. Yeah,
yeah.
exactly. It's what we hope, isn't it? We are evolving, and my sons are magnificent. It's like you said. My beginnings are part of the story, and do explain why I have the stance that I do. So I was skipping along, really healthy. They suggested that I should end my pregnancy. I didn't ask a single question. I went home, packed a case, skipped back in, was very excited to meet my baby. 3 days later, he was cut out of my abdomen.
No.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. The real deal. The real induction cascade.
Right.
Yeah, yeah,
50%. Yeah.
yeah. And then obviously I still hadn't learnt my lesson enough, so I then went and had him jabbed with everything on the list of jabs. And in the same year that they were hiding the evidence that DTaP and or MMR is associated with autism in black boys. So they were hiding that whilst I was injecting my son with the poison. So, I personally, for me, like I saw the truth straight away. It took me another 20 years to really get back, to get my power back. And so when I'm suggesting to people to reclaim their power, it's not something that I haven't had to do myself. Yeah, I've had to be healed. I didn't look at my cesarean scar for 10 years. I didn't
Oh,
touch it or look at it.
wow.
Yeah.
With your second baby, did he come out of your vagina?
Yeah, he came out of my vagina, but under those circumstances. Remember, my back was against the door. I was
Yeah.
screaming. He was born and I passed out. So he's still, yeah. So apparently I hemorrhaged.
Okay.
So I still don't, I have reconciled with my birthing stories. I've now thankfully really gone for the deep work and, understand my mum's story of birthing me, her being born, where my grandmother was at, going back through the generations. I get it, and I finally have peace. But the reason, like, somebody mistook the edge on my attitude and my postings and my voice. They mistook it as me still being in pain. I said, oh, no, no, no. I've had this conversation. I've done my work. I'm still, the work is still manifesting. My sons absolutely know. They're just so proud of me and what I'm doing, and behind it, because they were the result of maternity iatrogenesis.
Yeah.
They had to walk back to health as a result of that. So, I'd imagine, I'd collapsed apparently, and I'd hemorrhaged. And then when I woke up, they'd already given my newborn child, my second one, 90 mils of formula.
Wow.
90 mils, right? So I just I just said, well, and I stayed in the hospital because I was very anemic. I was anemic before I had him. I stayed in the hospital and I said, I'm just going to stay here in this room. So I commandeered a room. I said, I'm going to stay here, and me and him are just going to keep doing this until he breastfeeds. So of course he'd had 90 mils of cow juice, and then was very resistant to my colostrum because he'd already had the big guns as far as he was concerned. But anyway, on the third day, he was breastfeeding, and then my milk came in on the fourth day, I was very stressed. It took a while to come in, and then it came in, and then we were flying. We breastfed for 2 years. But I'm sorry to bring that in, but I just want to say the steps to reclaiming our power are small and painful, and we sometimes have to recover between each step, but it's still endlessly worth it. And the reason why I have my voice today isn't because I'm hurt and pissed off and angry. We've resolved that. It's because every single day, women are contacting me who are being treated the same, if not worse, than I was treated 30 years ago. That's why I'm angry. That's why I'm shrill.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, it's actually insane that everyone isn't talking about this all the time.
Yes.
You know, because we all get born. You know, this
Yeah.
isn't a woman's issue. This isn't a
No.
mother's issue. We're all fucking born, and
Yeah.
almost every mother baby, are being violated.
That's right.
Like literally.
That's right.
So at what point after, let's go with the second one, or even with your first baby, like at what point do you start to put the pieces together of what the hell just happened and how abusive it was, and you know, arguably unnecessary? It is necessary within the system, but as a whole human being, of course, none of that was necessary. You know, like what does it look like in those early years? Is there anyone validating your experience? Are you alone? Are you mothering primarily alone? And like, at what point do you start to have this awakening to the truth? I mean, I assume you know it in your bones pretty
Yeah,
early.
I knew it in my bones. I knew that I descended, like every single woman until me had given birth vaginally. There wasn't a single cesarean in my entire line of thousands of women. I knew that because otherwise I wouldn't have been here. Yeah. My mum was born in Lagos, Nigeria. She's Sierra Leonean, which is another West African country, but she was born in Lagos, Nigeria. Everything was vaginal, vaginal, vaginal. So I had such an amazing amount of shame. I can't tell you. And if a woman's in front of me and she's feeling ashamed of her cesareans, I want to shake her because I think, God, shame? No way! Like your body was on a theatre table. You allowed yourself to be cut open for another little human. It's amazing. But for some reason, all I could feel at that time was huge shame. My ex-husband at the time didn't want to talk about it, didn't want me to talk about it,
Whoa.
would laugh at me.
Whoa.
Only because he was immature. Yeah. Just thought it was ridiculous that I should consider that a baby should come out of my vagina just like all the women that I descended from over thousands of years. Yeah. So couldn't get it. There was no space to talk about it. No one else wanted to talk about it. Oh, at least you've got a healthy baby. You know, if you were to say to a man who couldn't have an erection, oh, don't worry about it. That's all right. We'll just hold it up for you. You know, there'd be an outcry. Be an outcry if 50% of men couldn't have an erection. Be an outcry. Yeah. But apparently we're supposed to just be really quiet, just feeling really grateful. At least you got a healthy baby. You know, just be quiet and get on with it. Shh.
Did any part of that, like how much did you suffer in that, in being gaslit by everyone? Like, if you're aware, I'm trying to imagine it, you know, like how aware are you? Because I mean, so many women don't question it, and that's how they survive, which I get. You know, it's harder to question it. It's harder to really feel what was taken.
Yeah.
Obviously, the other side of that is power, but it's so painful.
So painful.
So how do you start to,
Colours every waking thought, every decision you're going to make, you second guess because you say, well, couldn't really get a baby out, could you? You know, That's basic. So because it didn't occur to me the sabotage until it was around until my eldest child was 10.
Wow.
That's when I realized, yeah, honestly, it took a decade for the penny to drop. And then it took another decade to talk about it. It's so deep. It's so deep. Um, and it's just endlessly painful. It killed my marriage, absolutely killed my marriage. And it took me ages to make eye contact with my newborn. So just, in the short term, I just couldn't look him in his eyes until he was about 6 weeks old.
Mm.
And I don't know, it was just a huge amount of shame. And especially because I was descended from, my heritage is slavery. Like my mum was Sierra Leonean, but a tribe called Creole. So Creole, basically. So they were the returned slaves to Africa. So repatriation was offered, and my mum's ancestors, our ancestors were amongst those that chose to go back to Africa. And then my dad is Barbadian. So basically, my dad's family never left the plantation.
Mm.
So you've got that happening,
Mm.
knowing all the women in my lineage
Right.
probably gave birth in a barn with no food, pressed up against other slaves.
Mm.
Yeah, that's how they gave birth. And then realizing, Emily, that was better
Right.
than what
Well,
I chose.
totally.
This is a massive amount of feelings I've had and
Mhm.
thoughts, etc. So when I see people fight their way in tears to their power now, makes me cry every time. I'm always crying, but it's a joy cry.
Me too. Kind of. Yeah. So 10 years to talk about it. So internally, you're working it out, you're questioning it, you're putting the pieces together. When do you start to actively learn about birth and the system and all of that?
Yeah, yeah, really good question. So it was when before I even spoke about my own pain and trauma, I knew I had needed to work it out by helping other women. So when my eldest was 7, so this is before I started talking about it, I started being a doula. So he's 30 now.
Okay.
So I started being a doula, and it was at night because I needed my income during the day. I was a single parent, and I needed a full income. And then when I couldn't earn it outside of the home anymore, because I used to miss my boys so badly, just honestly, the pain. So by the time my eldest was 5, I had to leave working outside of the home. So I had a little office and was doing accounting for small businesses in the office, small charities actually. And so I could manage my own time better. So I started being a doula at night because I knew I could just sleep during the day and stuff. So I'd be around. Most babies wanted to come at night, so it was working really well. And then I started to notice a lot of unnecessary happening. So I was giddy about being in the birth room because I felt like I was coming home. And then I started to notice unnecessary things happening to women. Most of the clients I had were black women. They'd be having midwives that wouldn't give them eye contact or look at them or answer their questions properly. And so I said, "Oh God, I've got to do something about this." And so then um, I was doing a stint kind of managing a small office of accounts people like payroll and things like that, and having a whale of a time, really great fun. And then so I was acting up in that role for my finance manager who'd gone on a long sabbatical, about 6 weeks somewhere. And so she said, "Could you wait in the office for me to come back from the airport?" So she called me when she was at the airport. She said, "Could you wait in the office? I should be there by 7. Then we can just do a quick handover. Then you can take tomorrow off." So it's brilliant. So I waited in, and I don't know what happened. I think I had a lot of time to reflect on, yeah, this has been a really great time. I've had a really great time, but the calling was so strong. So by the time she walked into the office, I was hosing tears. Like she was going, what? She couldn't get me to stop crying, and I said, and she goes, "What's the matter? What's the matter?" And I said, "I have to be a midwife." She said, "Well, just go on then." It's just like it insisted. And so I did a 2 month like working to the end of that contract, and they gave me a wonderful send off, and then I started my midwifery training. And so I started my midwifery training, and then by the second year, Emily, I was in hell because I'd done a stint on labour wards and heard all the mutilation and abuse that was happening. It was just it was very triggering for me, and I did look like someone that was unraveling, and so I took a few months out and tried to have counselling, but it's not a counselling issue. I was being vicariously abused, basically, and
I mean,
so
so many women do this. So many women
yeah,
are abused in the system and then think that their healing path will be to go back into that same system and be different for the women. And like that makes sense until you try it, and then you realize it's like it's a well-intended unsustainable move.
I know. And when you put it like that, Emily, you know, like I'm saying, yeah, it doesn't quite make sense. And
I get it. I totally
I get it, but I would still say I probably knew from before I went on the register that I probably would not be able to stay on it. And
I was wondering with your birth work, when did you see your birth? Like when did you see the induction into C-section?
Oh yeah, so I saw that when he was around 20. So I'd already started yeah, I was already on the register. Sadly, it's so weird because I don't know why it took for me. I needed to be on the register, become an independent midwife, sit in births unfolding by themselves again and again. That's when the full hit came. But it was okay because I'd already done most of the work, and I'd forgiven myself, and I'd sought forgiveness of my children, and I'd been modeling something different, and they were believing something better about women and their ability to birth. Because I gave birth to 2 sons, you know, it really mattered. I really wanted to make sure that the citizens that I'd brought into the world were helpful, not a hindrance.
Yeah.
And yeah, really, you know, if I'm gonna bring people here, come on. Yeah.
Let's take it all away.
I don't want to add to the problem, okay? So they are magnificent men. They are magnificent kings.
Wow.
Without a shadow of doubt. And I in every respect, even to how they support childbirth, even to what they think of a woman's ability to birth. They are magnificent, and I would love to take all the credit, but I'm guessing they've come with that calling as well. I don't know. They're just amazing physiological birth advocates. They do. Their eyebrows fly off their hairline if their friends say that they're giving birth and it's not at home. Their eyebrows literally fly off of their head, and they start pleading with them. Do
both of your sons have children?
One of them does.
Okay.
But the other one, it's like a done deal. I was on the phone when my younger one came into the house, and I said, and he was wanting to talk to me. I said, no. I said, Fats is having the baby. And he goes, but you're here. And I said, I know, the baby's coming now. There's nothing I could do. And he said, so they're not going into hospital? Like, it was terrified. I said, no, darling, they're at home.
How old is he, the younger one?
He's 28.
Is he single?
Oh no, sadly not.
I know a lot of women that are looking for a physiological birth.
Well, sadly not. No, he's just something else. Like his only concern.
I know women are thinking it right now as they hear you talk about it.
There's more of them.
I'm going to get DMs asking about her son.
There's more of them to come. There are a lot more young men, you know, even if it's just amongst their friends. I'm coming across a lot more young men that are kind of shrugging and saying, why are we putting women on the conveyor belt for them to go to harm?
I often find men understand some of this stuff, even like with trans ideology.
Yes.
They like get things like, yeah, duh, instead of the like, but we need to make sure everyone never has their feelings hurt, the whole thing we do. Yeah. Okay, so you become the registered midwife. You're working as an independent midwife though, so you're doing home birth.
Yeah, that's right.
So
I
you
am.
kind of make it through like the crazy time of the trainings and the L&D and all of that, and you find a spot for you.
I
That
do.
seems
Yeah.
sounds pretty good. So
Sounds
what happened?
pushy. That's right. That should be the end of the story, right?
Well, I already know that you and I are two kindred of spirits, that would not be the end of the story.
It'd be fine, like happily ever after, right? No, it's not, because there's this enmity I noticed between NHS midwives and independent midwives. And then there's this cockiness amongst some of the independent midwives. I know everyone's going to say, "Oh, Kemi," but there is there were still times we were very trusted. Yes, we've got gold standard care, but there was still an element of disrespect of the birth process that was in there. But I'll tell you something, independent midwives, I don't care what anyone says. I've been there, I've seen it, I've seen who become private midwives, whatever. Independent midwives are the absolute cream of the crop if you're going to have a registered midwife. If you're going to have, I've seen them advocate like nothing before. Like people say, it's a famous saying, trying to organize independent midwives is like trying to herd cats. And I'm proud of that, you know. However, there's stuff that our registration body, Nursing and Midwifery Council, are co-signing, which is absolutely unforgivable. Did you read that famous statement that the Nursing and Midwifery Council made about how abominable it is that women should be asked to go into hospitals wearing masks and have their partners stay outside of the hospital unless they submit to vaginal examinations to get them in? No, you haven't read that statement because it doesn't exist. Okay. The Nursing and Midwifery Council, who are supposed to be there for the protection of families and to support midwives, don't care what's happened to birth in the last almost 2 years. They don't care. Okay. The other thing, the gold standard midwives, independent midwives in this country, have had problems with insurance for years. Since we joined the EU, or we were part of the EU, there was this directive that said that to provide birth care, regardless of whether parents want to write a disclaimer or not, we can't do it without paying some big wig insurance company who don't give a fuck about birth outcomes for premiums. Okay. The Nursing and Midwifery Council, to protect the only real bastion of gold standard care, didn't say a thing. Don't care. They don't care. So now independent midwives don't exist in the UK anymore unless it's for antepartum or postnatal care. Where we shine is the amount of times we prevented transfer, hemorrhage, poor outcomes, assisted twin birth, breech birth, everything in the home.
So they lost their ability to have insurance coverage? Is that
Yeah,
what you're saying?
yeah, that's right.
Okay.
So, and the Nursing and Midwifery Council colluded with that whole thing, because what they wanted us to do is to shut up, be very good girls, go back into the NHS and follow the NHS employer rules, because they're not about the well-being of the woman, the child. That's just them being employers and being assholes.
So the
So
independent midwives that do exist are just operating outside of insurance?
So you can't call yourself a midwife if you're not on the register. You can't stay on the register attending births as an independent midwife without the insurance.
Gotcha.
There's none of the insurance available. So you either have to become a private midwife, which is a company that's kind of employing independent midwives, or you have to have managed to somehow get covered by a hospital, but in which case they're the ones that are giving you the parameters about who you can look after. So the true authentic midwife, that term, which I love as well, but I'm not allowed to use the term midwife in this country because I'm not on the register anymore, took myself off. Authentic midwife, to be that here, you have to deregister.
Totally.
Yes.
I mean, it's like that here too. Yeah.
Oh, right. Okay, so you totally understand.
Oh yeah.
So I call myself an independent midwife as a joke.
Totally.
But I usually call myself a birth keeper, because if I use the term midwife, they'll want to charge me some silly amount of money, and I don't want to do that.
So you are years into your midwifery career and are putting all this together. And then tell me about the like breaking point where you actually take yourself off the registry.
The breaking point was I'd had 3 calls in 1 week, and they were all from people that I'd looked after, where someone had called them from the Nursing and Midwifery Council to ask if I'd been their midwife and if I was at the birth.
Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, because if people had me as their midwife, they might mention it on Instagram, or a few of them are Googleable, so it might be in the paper or something else. And if they were in the papers, they would always refer to my midwife. They wouldn't say my name, because I was very upfront with them about the situation. So they were wonderful, and yet, like, one of them, I'd looked after them for the second time, so they were kind of aware that I might have been their midwife from the first time, and they all received calls.
And you weren't supposed to be attending because you didn't have insurance.
That's right, exactly.
Yeah, so you were in like a weird suspended state, kind of.
I was in a suspended state because I when the insurance was vanishing, because we had like a 2-day period. We thought we'd had it arranged, and then on the 28th of June, and so we thought we'd had it arranged, an alternative. Then on the 28th of June, they told us, oh yeah, you only have to pay a premium of 7.5 grand per birth, and you're fine. That's all you had to do. That's all you had to do. And so, and then our insurance disappeared like 2 days later. So, I'd already been telling them all the throes of it from earlier that year. So when it all came about, it was really easy for them. They said, well, I'd rather give birth in the middle of Piccadilly Circus with pigeons than go anywhere other than give birth with you. So she said, whatever you do, all of them, they said, whatever you do, just make sure you get to my birth, or I'm free birthing. And that was it. And they didn't want a free birth because they'd chosen a midwife. Okay. So I said, well, I'm never going to dump you, so let's see what we can do. And then meanwhile, I was saying, like, how badly do I need this registration? Do I really want to be associated with the Nursing and Midwifery Council? They're not protecting anyone. They're not protecting midwives. They're certainly not protecting families. They're protecting the NHS, I think. Yeah. So in the end, it was just a no-brainer. But it was literally like, it was like wrenching that registration out of me. It's I don't know. It took
scary.
It took longer than it should have done, Emily. Come on, what we know. Come on. It took me months to actually open my computer, complete the form, and press send.
Yeah. Well, were you feeling scared?
No, it wasn't fear. I knew it was going to be a one-way trip. I knew I'd worked so hard for something, and I hate having to work so hard for something and then literally set fire to it. So that was all. Once I'd done it, it made complete sense. And now I'm woohoo!
Yeah.
I think it's though because I had this term midwife from the age of 15, and so it was like almost 4 decades of dreaming about it, working towards it, being it, becoming it, then being it. So to me, it felt like letting go quite a lot of my identity.
But don't let them fool you and think that they own that word. Just because the country you live in could get up your ass about it, don't ever forget that is our word, and it has always been and will always be and is in every land. you know? So yes, I get it. I also don't call myself a midwife because of where I live.
Right.
Most of the women I know who are keeping authentic midwifery alive on this planet don't use that word.
Wow.
And it's something that we're always contending with, of like, do we put that word down? Do we fight for the word? Like, how do we be in this in between space? Because they don't own this fucking word. They think they
No.
do, and they've obviously quite successfully co-opted it in the public eye, but
Right.
it's a sacred word, you know? And even just like with the word woman, you know, like men are trying to co-opt the word woman, but I love that word and it's a
I love
sacred
that
word to
word.
me, you know, or mother or whatever, right? There's so many words that are ours. I mean, we
Yeah.
just did an episode around the word witch, and the word witch was always our word, and it meant wise woman, just like midwife means in literal translation all over the world. And
Yes.
yeah, it's been weaponized against us, and it's been, you know, it has this whole charge, and a lot of women who are wise women don't use the word witch because of how it's been weaponized, but it's still our word. And I think there's something, I know it's complicated, because I think you and I are really on very similar journeys. Like I don't claim that word publicly, but I
Yeah.
claim that fucking word. You know, like it can't
Yes.
be taken, even if I put it down and I get creative. Like I made up the term radical birth keeper. You know, Janice Hardy
Yes.
Baker obviously created birth keeper, and I added the word radical to it to be like, okay, well, this could kind of signal what I'm doing, because I can't say midwife because people think midwife means I'm going to finger them and monitor them. So I can't say that.
So true.
But
That's
but
not what
that being
midwife
said, kind of where I'm going with this is that we can't forget, even if we put that word down and we say birth keeper and other stuff, what we're doing, our willingness to continue on in authentic midwifery, doing the work of midwifery and keeping that work alive. We have to remember that this is reclaiming midwifery as it once was and as it will be again. And so they can't have that word. Like
Okay.
they can, in a way, you know what I mean? It's smoke and mirrors, but we also, I feel like, have a duty to
Yeah.
keep the word alive in our inner circles with the families we serve, because
Yeah.
it is our true word for what we're doing.
Yeah.
You
Okay.
you know what I'm
Okay.
saying?
Do you know this conversation, if we only had it for me to hear what you just said,
Totally.
yeah,
Yeah.
and I will die with that imprinted in my heart. That's what we are. And I honestly, like you say, we can play the game of them if we want, because I just don't like handing over money for nothing with these
Totally.
silly things, right?
Well, in many
Um,
places, it's not safe. Like it is illegal in certain
yeah,
states in my country or in Canada. They own the word in this day and time,
yeah,
but also fuck them, and no one owns words, you
yeah,
know,
that's
and like
right.
women own this word, you know.
Right.
So it's kind of that holding it in both ways,
Yeah,
you
that's
know.
right. Yeah, and we can do that. You
Right.
know, I've always known that there are shades of grey in life. I've not always wanted to live that truth, but honestly, it's all grey. And and just what you said to me just now, I'm going to make sure and pass on to everyone who is walking our walk, because I never realised that you and I had so much in common. And although I've watched and admired your work, I just didn't know we had that much in common. And we need to be this strong
Right.
and this true for all the people, because there are a lot of people that I get contacted by, and I'm sure you're exactly the same, that have our calling and are in bits. Doesn't They don't know how to express it, where to express it safely, where will they be accepted, you know, if they work in it, what will their income be,
Right. It's
you
why
know.
we started our school. And it's why we call it what we call it. You know, it's an authentic midwifery program that we call the Radical Birth Keeper School,
Yeah,
because in our whole initial first couple of weeks is explaining this whole complex time to be in this work and
yeah,
have the word be co-opted, but the work be alive, and how to dance in that, but never, ever, ever forget that us attending births is midwifery.
That's right.
you know, and that can't be taken even if we're going to play with it. And I mean, it's very similar to, you know, I have many critiques around trans ideology, but, you know, one of them is, no, you cannot take my word. You cannot. I will not play this game. It is our word, and we need a word that defines who we are on this planet. And females are women. And I protect that, right, internally and in my life. And it's the same kind of complexity in some ways with midwifery. Yeah, Yolanda and I talk a lot about how there's this paradox where we say midwifery is dead, long live midwifery.
Yeah.
And that's you know, she's said it on the podcast that midwifery is dead and the work of midwifery cannot be killed.
No, it can't.
But we are continuing it behind closed doors, some of us in the public eye. And what is midwifery? And actually, and Yolanda articulates this way better than I can, but we would both actually argue that it is not midwifery once you're registered, once you have the state involved and you have a daddy telling you how to, you know, how to show up for women. Get the fuck out of here with that. That's not midwifery. Midwifery never involved men telling us what to do.
I know.
I know. Weird and patriarchal and infantilizing, right? So I love this.
Oh, wow.
That you've been on, because you have actually become a midwife by deregistering and by working out where your loyalties lie and figuring out and claiming that your loyalties are actually with the family. You are now a midwife.
That's the end of the list. And thank you. And I am now a midwife. It's so funny that you're saying that, because I do feel that decision, gosh, it's been a while now, but that decision, I do feel like a door was open to me. In fact, I pressed send on my deregistering form, and then I was called 30 minutes later to a birth, which was spectacular.
I love it.
It was spectacular, and it was almost like a screenplay. Seriously, you should have seen it, right? And I went and I used herbs for the first time with a brisk bleed. So I used herbs because before, and you can't use herbs unless you're a herbalist, right? But I'm not on the register anymore. Right. So I took my herbs and they were used. And so I used herbs, but it was so funny the timing of it all, because then I started to really take deep breaths of freedom, and then take a big exhale of the weight and that toxic energy that goes with trying to kowtow to, if not an employer, to a registration body, when actually all you want to do is sit there and keep the space for a magnificent woman. That's all you want to do.
And then you can actually show up completely as a whole woman in that space. And versus being fragmented like before. I mean, that's beautiful. It really is being in integrity, right? Like integrity defined as wholeness. Right. And I have the very strong opinion that you can't be in integrity and midwifery and be licensed and registered. Because even, like Yolanda again says this better than I, but I'll share her concept that she taught me, that if you're licensed, you have to betray somebody. You're either betraying your licensing body or you're betraying the family, right? And so that's not in integrity.
No, it's not.
And if you just take the license out of it and just show up woman to woman, now the possibility of integrity has arrived. You still have to walk through those gates and choose at every moment. But it's actually not possible if there's a licensing body involved, even if you're trying to be that unicorn midwife. Because you will have to abandon either your licensing or the woman at some point, right?
At some point. At some point.
You'll totally have births that hang out in the middle where you don't have to do that. But eventually you'll have the 35-weeker or the 43-weeker or anything, right? Anything.
Fortunately, in the UK, Okay, so yes, you're right. There's an issue. If you stay at home with a 35-weeker, you'll probably find yourself answering questions. If you're at home with a 43-weeker in this country, you don't necessarily need to answer any questions. So I think that's why it's been slightly easier for me to be on the register for longer than I'd have ever expected to, with the kind of birthing that I've seen done. And I'd say as well that my colleagues that are independent midwives, I've seen them cross all sorts of lives
Yeah.
without a blink. They will just do it. So you're right. I've seen them easily choose to betray the registration
Totally.
rather than the woman. And that's what I always want to see. So I know there's some people still hanging out on the register that I know when push comes to shove, they'll choose the woman before their registration. And so I know they're walking in their authenticity. I've gone a step further. My step suits me, because part of being on the register, and this will actually highlight what you've just said, part of being on the register means you can't bring midwifery into disrepute. And when you're talking about midwifery and what's bringing it into disrepute, you know, women being loaded onto the conveyor belt without a question and with no evidence apparently isn't bringing midwifery into disrepute.
Right.
But me talking about it is. Yeah. So in a way, you're right. I could never have stayed on the register, you know, and definitely now that I'm off of it, now I'm everything, all the truth is coming out.
Yeah, you can't go back.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, definitely. I wouldn't last long. Occasionally when I say things now, I feel like adding, and just for all of your information, I'm not suicidal. Like, I just feel like saying that sometimes, just in case I come up missing, because
Yeah, totally. That brings it full circle to the first part when we weren't recording. Yeah, seriously. Yolanda's done that in some of her videos. Yeah, I feel you, girl. Okay, so how can women find you if they want to learn from you or work with you or find you on Instagram? Tell us.
Oh, thank you. On Instagram, it's my playground. At first, it was like, oh, Instagram's Facebook, forget it. But no, I'm having so much fun there, and I'm having such a laugh there. So you'll find me on Instagram, Kemi BirthJoy Johnson on Instagram. I've got things being offered there on my link tree. So if you want to find out how to get more of me, it's on there. This podcast will be listed on there because it's just so fabulous chatting with you, Emily. And I will always be available in my DMs. I know some people, it can be overwhelming. I think with your following, it would be impossible, Emily, but I'm just a nice, cozy 11.5K. So, and also I'm getting my book out.
When it's out, we could do an Instagram live about it.
I'd love
That would be
to,
fun
because
promote.
you are the authentic go-to place, you and what you've created for people to realize their power. Ultimately, it's amazing. I love it.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
I appreciate your friendship and your presence today, and it was so fun to discover that we had so much in common.
Yeah.
All right, girlfriend.
All right.
Thanks.
Take care.
And that's it for today, my sisters. Check out everything we do, including one-on-one and group coaching, learn about our private membership, in-person retreats, and more on freebirthsociety.com. Our online courses are on freebirthsocietycourses.com, including our flagship course, The Complete Guide to Free Birth. Don't miss the Radical Birthkeeper School if you're ready to become the authentic midwife that women are searching for. Together we rise, and the revolution starts inside each of us. I'll leave you with our Free Birth Society theme song, Wild Woman by Aruba Red.
I honor you for the wisdom you held, the ancient traditions of plant medicine and womb magic. I feel the spirit of the ancestors as I place my hands upon my belly. This sacred portal will be honored. Eons shines upon light beams of survival, withstanding the eradication of our power by design. I will not allow the separation of our young to be forced upon me. My sisters will no longer birth in captivity. The picket line redefined from burning our wild women to paralyzing us and drugging our babes. Strapped down in a clinical white bed, drying up the milk from our breasts, keep your needles. My family will never again be doomed to chase those dragons or your poison. We reject your fear. We choose love. Everything with intention. Death, ascension. I will fly and bring her back from the stars. Conscious conception.